So this is 10 minutes to 9 a.m. in the morning of Saturday, the 3rd of July, 2021. Or 8:50 hours. GMT in London, in the UK. On Saturday, the 3rd of July, 2021. And what we have is the Sun, which on the evidence of its contents and the role and the bias and the emptiness and ignorance, we have renamed this scum. And we have done that strictly on the evidence of the last, let's say, 42 years since the dirty digger, as he is called by the Private Eye magazine, and it's not a credit we are giving to the current lot in control of the Private Eye magazine. It was the dirty digger was given correctly the name during the almost peak, the creative peak of the Private Eye magazine, which has been suppressed and subsided under the corrupt and opportunistic frontage by Ian Pissoff and Frantic Swine. These two names are our own names. Frantic is Francis the racist swine, and Ian Pissoff the racist Ian Hislop. And Hislop has become a millionaire. He has been made a millionaire by being paid millions of pounds of the license fee payers' money. The BBC corruptly has abused the license fee payers' money. We shall, of course, be examining the evidence of the BBC's corruption. So Frantic Swine has been less enriched by the BBC, considerably less enriched by the BBC as compared to Ian Pissoff. Now this is the KhoodeelaarTV television channel, Part A, which is the world exclusive diagnosis of Fleet Street. The Fleet Street, of course, includes this scum and this one. This is the definitive symbol of Fleet Street. So what we are noticing is that most of the Fleet Street titles that were obsessed with the effort to find any way whatsoever of undermining, downplaying the prospects of the Labour Party's candidate at the by-election that took place on the Thursday, the 1st of July in Batley and Spen. So they were saying the Starmer was sunk. The Starmer will be challenged after the, as they said, predicted, definite, certain disaster at the by-election, then due to be held at Batley and Spen in West Yorkshire. And the Fleet Street Liars were, of course, working in tandem with George Galloway. And George Galloway parasited himself by falsely claiming that he was the voice of the voiceless in the constituency. What he was capitalizing on was the trademark corrupt parasitic role that he had been able to play, at least in 2005 in Bethnal Green and Bow, and in March 2012 in Bradford West. Bradford West, of course, being another Yorkshire place, not far from the Batley and Spen in West Yorkshire. And here they've given him a 2-page spread, standing with his mask on while the people he's apparently in conversation with when the photograph or the image was taken are without masks. And at least one of them definitely looks like a Muslim with a kind of trademark Muslim beard. Whether he supported Labour Party or not is not clear. So the Galloway had to challenge result claiming defamation. That is page 8. But most of the kind of image is given to Galloway and his persons he is in apparent conversation with. Now, we shall be talking about Galloway in the days and weeks to come in the context of the evidence, because Galloway has established himself mainly by himself, claiming to be the only voice of support for the Palestinians. And the Batley and Spen constituency has a significant number on the electoral roll of people born with Pakistani origin, Kashmiri origin, very similar in terms of the origins and the general outlook to the people in Bradford West. Now, according to the political editor of the I newspaper, whose byline appears in the Scotsman today, which I haven't got in front of me to put before the camera, but the online access to the Scotsman today is by somebody who has a name that is the exact same name that belongs to the person who is in post as the political editor at the I newspaper. Now that is the kind of Scotsman is the equivalent in Scotland of Fleet Street, and it's a Tory newspaper, right-wing newspaper, and it won't make any difference if it wasn't a Tory, if it was a so-called left-wing newspaper, because as we have to emphasize, this is a program that is called World Exclusive Diagnosis of Fleet Street. A diagnosis is only necessary or is necessitated by the presence of sickness. And Fleet Street, on the evidence that we know and we can demonstrate, and we have been demonstrating exclusively, has been a sick collection of print media for as long as it has existed. So it's not like in the last 10 years or the 20 years or 30 years or 40 years. It has been sick from the beginning of Fleet Street, when the number of titles, of course, was much smaller, mainly represented by in numerical terms, not in ethical terms or evidential terms, by the Times newspaper as it then was. And it was later joined by the Guardian, much later. But even when the Guardian wasn't called the Guardian from London and was called the Manchester Guardian, the political agenda that we are interested in the context of the overall role and the narrative and the bias and the distortion and the lies and racism, the Manchester Guardian was as racist, as corrupt, as imperialistic, as much involved in perpetuating the racist, imperialist British Raj myths and mythologies created, confected, fabricated to make the British Raj and the empire in the subcontinent now made up of India, Pakistan and Bangladesh, the three countries that were occupied for 190 years, since a number of traitors betrayed the country and colluded with the East India Company and its fronter, the racist crook and the liar, Robert Clive. Now, we have been carrying out simultaneous investigation into the script, the ideology, on the themes being peddled, conveyed, and brought across to the viewers by Cinema India. This is our phrase. Cinema India is not used by anybody else. We have created this in order to include Calcutta-based or Kolkata in West Bengal-based filmmakers and films and productions, as well as those produced in Madras, what is now Chennai, Bangalore, Hyderabad in Tamil Nadu, Kerala, Karnataka, in the Tamil, Telugu, and Hindi languages, and also, of course, Mumbai, which used to be called Bombay. We have been carrying out investigation based on the demonstrable evidence of the contents. And we have found right from the beginning that Cinema India is serving the regime, the political regime in control of the central government, as well as the kind of copies and imitations in the states. Most of the states and central government, of course, are controlled by Narendra Modi fronted cabal of BJP, which is made up of the Hindu fundamentalist fascists and deniers of human rights to the millions of people that are called Dalits, untouchables. So the Guardian today is reporting which is unjustified, because there is no way that Galloway can challenge the result claiming defamation effectively. This is a stunt that any intelligent, rational observer of Galloway's antics would have worked out by now. Because Galloway's only capital outside of the Labour Party has been his being permitted by Muslim voters in two of the constituencies, one Bethnal Green and Bow, and one Bradford West, permitted by Muslim voters to peddle the line that he is in support of the Palestinians. That's a parasitical untruth, because Galloway uses that as a kind of slogan, as a trading slogan for his parasite career in order to attract donations. And as we have said, he has never published most of the details of the facts of the sums of the donations that he receives. And although John Stonehouse was jailed for his financial corruption and abuse of the name Bangladesh and the British Bangladesh Bank and all the rest of it, the only currently circulating ex-politician or ex-MP that is operating so far unprosecuted business of raising funds without disclosing them is George Galloway. Let him deny that, and let Galloway repeat any of the racist stupidities that he might have perpetrated while he was still in place as MP at the expense of Bethnal Green and Bow. We are saying that Galloway has not sued the BBC for a devastatingly detailed series of claims they made against him, receiving money from the Pakistan political establishment concerned at the time. Galloway has not sued them. And the Guardian's morons should know that Galloway has not sued the BBC over the Newsnight allegations against him, because that is more devastatingly detailed against Galloway than all the contents of the Daily Telegraph group, as it then was, that made the allegations about funds that Galloway received or sought or claimed from sources in Iraq. So Galloway is being given this propaganda by the Guardian unjustifiably on the facts. We don't say that they haven't got the right to do the propaganda for him if they want to, but we have the right to point out the falsehood at the root of the propaganda. And so we said the political editor of the Independent I newspaper, not independent, it was part of the independent group at the time it was launched, but it is no longer. The I newspaper's so-called political editor has an exactly identical name as the byline given to the writer or the byline holder or byline carrier or courier by the Scotsman. Again, the Scotsman piece is very much a propaganda piece for George Galloway. It even boldly claims that never write off George Galloway. Of course, that is a phrase. But if anyone actually examined the evidence of Galloway's, let's say, various bids to become elected again, were not kind of able to exploit the presence among the particular electorate of Muslims of Pakistani origin, because although Galloway has benefited personally, career-wise, from the significant number of Bangladeshi Muslims present in the Bethnal Green and Bow constituency, and then in 2010 in the Poplar and Limehouse constituency, the support for the Labour Party candidate by the Bangladeshis as recorded for the 2010 general election in the constituency of Poplar and Limehouse shows that the Bangladeshis supported the Labour Party candidate more significantly than they did George Galloway. In any case, Galloway didn't get elected, and it is very likely that he will not get elected by using the same corrupt tactic of parasiting himself at the expense of the Muslims. And there will be, and we are saying there should be, serious investigation into Galloway's entire career. And if there is such a factual investigation into the facts of his career, it will become very obvious that he's a phony, and he is, as described by Ken Livingston in his appearance on GB News after the results were published of the Batley and Spen by-election in the last 24 hours. And Livingston's word is bonkers, that George Galloway has become or has been behaving as bonkers. And George Galloway is bonkers. We said about 2 years ago, maybe, okay, let's say in the last 2 years, we have said, posted publicly, that Galloway cannot get elected. I mean, this is assuming that nothing nightmarishly unprecedented happens anywhere within the constituencies in relation to Muslims, in relation to the niche that he has created. So we said that Galloway should concentrate on creating any platform if he believes in any morality, in ethics. And he should stop seeking to topple, unseat, or topple or defeat any of the parties. Because for example, in the bid that he made by begging nasty Nigel Farage to give him this is not the Guardian, this is the I newspaper that I've given the 2 pages. That is the I newspaper. And this is the I newspaper whose political editor is very much pro-George Galloway. This is the Guardian, not the I newspaper. So we correct this. It's the Guardian, not the I newspaper. We just had looked at the Guardian, but had not checked the front page. So we continued the reference to the Guardian rather than identify the piece as being in the I newspaper. So it's a correction. It's a logistical correction sitting there. And the Guardian is actually doing the opposite of what the I newspaper is doing, which is saying Starmer is calling for end to division after Labour wins Batley by-election. So it's the opposite heading by the Guardian to that in the I newspaper where they're promoting George Galloway. And the Scotsman, which is published, of course, from Edinburgh, unlike the Daily Record, which is published from Glasgow. The Scotsman online has got a piece that contains a very strong promotion and spews George Galloway's qualities, as it claims. We shall be talking about this Scotsman more later. Not necessarily in this part, but in a later edition. And there are, of course, various contradictory items, even in The Guardian, about COVID-19. And there is a piece, well, there are several pieces sympathetic to the scientific kind of advisor, scientific officer on COVID. After news got confirmed that at least one of his attackers has been arrested. And there are various pieces about the attack on Haque, and also about the pervasive, widespread conspiracy theories, as they're called, against the lockdown being broadcast. And as is always the case, there is a smiling picture by Brenda. Well, smiling picture of Brenda and Angela Merkel, which is a picture, as pictures go, that comes across as absolutely dignified in comparison with the picture that is of Merkel trying to catch up with Johnson as he leaves her behind. And Merkel and Brenda currently are among the two women in Western Europe who are, compared to the others, their contemporaries, are treated with much more respect by ordinary people than any of their contemporary politicians or women in public life. And the Financial Crimes Weekend, FT Weekend, as it is called, has got a Brexiteering front page. London reclaims Europe's share trading crown from Amsterdam. Business fled after Brexit. Return of Swiss deals crucial. Boost for City of London before rule shift. And the highlighted pieces, how to spend it in the travel magazine. It's a separate magazine. And can you change yourself? Lucy Calloway in Life and Arts. Master of the Dark Arts, how Tinios spun out of control. It's about companies and new rules. Private schools lose their grip on Oxbridge. FT Weekend magazine now. That is the FT Weekend magazine. There's the cover. So what is it saying about private schools? So what it is reading is new school rules. And it is saying that parents paying thousands of pounds a year for a top education in the hope of getting their children into Oxbridge are finding success harder to come by. Brooke Masters reports. Now there is no education at Oxbridge. There is no education in the schools. So, and that itself is a deeply, centrally kind of flawed claim to say that there is education. The fact that they are competing for a place in a brand kind of institution or branded institution dispels the claim that there is education involved. It is ranking and rating as based on the ability to get access to other privileges in society, as based on the brand. And as Oxbridge is used to get access to jobs in political party positions, elected positions, and in other respects in business, big business, etc. It is a proven fact that there is no education involved. There is a license, there is a card. And the people who are making the decisions are, by definition, the few. And they are violating the rights and the needs of the many. And the fact that there are anything between 15 to 20 million people in poverty in Britain shows that these people who make the decisions, most of them are related to or come from Oxbridge and similar backgrounds. So there is no education. There is denial. So the Weekend FT has got a piece at the back page of the FT Weekend called Lex. And its heading includes CEO pay, first class rewards. That actually relates to the Oxbridge and they claim to be educated to first class standard, not necessarily first class being awarded as degrees at the end of the course. Let's look at the linguistic bias in this piece. It's not transparency they're offering. They're offering a kind of criminal kind of boast, bragging about this information. Well-paid fund managers boast about the cost efficiency of the groups they invest in. Yet they have generally been happy to cover the high pay that boards give to CEOs. That has emboldened UK-listed airline Wizz Air to promise its chief executive, Josel Varadi, a maximum 100 million payment. But attitudes are shifting. Double the proportion of FTSE 100 shareholders voted against CEO remuneration this year than last year. The argument that great performance just justifies sky-high pay has lost ground. Averaging up of CEO pay means it is now wildly out of whack with ordinary incomes. But it doesn't say ordinary people's income. Ordinary income itself is a denial, linguistically denying the existence and the impact on the many. And the rest of the piece doesn't actually deal with the decisions that I talked about earlier that affect the causing and the perpetuation of poverty to the 20 million people. To take one example of one calculation. And there is a surprise heading: UK pension schemes waste billions, study finds. Now we should talk more about the pension and the crooks that have been ministers of pension in the department: deprivation, want and poverty creation, including the crook Steve Webb. And the Weekend FT has got a series of alluring headlines. But when you look at the actual contents of the piece or pieces underneath the headlines, you find no evidence to substantiate that alluring suggestion. Ethiopia's leader is tarnishing his reformist reputation as violence spreads in the Tigray region, writes David Pilling. And this man, the Ethiopian president, is given the description in the heading, the Nobel Peace Laureate at war. That's the piece. Because of the light being too near, it may not be legible, but that's the nearest that we can come. And Abiy Ahmed. Few leaders have seen their reputation fall so far and so fast as Abiy Ahmed. 2 years ago, Ethiopia's prime minister was being feted as a peacemaker and reformer. At the age of 43, he won the 2019 Nobel Peace Prize for emptying his country's jails of political prisoners, making peace with opposition groups, and ending a state of war with neighboring Eritrea. That was then. Now Abiy stands accused of pursuing a conflict in Ethiopia's northern region of Tigray that has unleashed a horror of rape, massacres, and ethnic cleansing. After months of fighting, the specter of famine hangs over Tigray, in a country where 2 decades of impressive economic development had appeared to banish the threat of starvation. So we'll talk about Ethiopia and Eritrea and starvation and hunger and famine more, about both about Africa, also about many regions and parts of Asia. And we shall do that in the context of the corrupt bureaucracy that has been now fronted by Antonio Guterres, who has been given a second term of 5 years as the Secretary General of the United Nations. The bureaucracies linked to it and operated by the United Nations organization are peddling, spinning, and spewing banalities about poverty, about rape, about hunger, about starvation, even about genocide, without pointing out the major causes of these conflicts. And I'm saying that even in Ethiopia, it's not just this Abiy Ahmed, the prime minister, who is among the causes, but there are others, including the policies and practices and connections operated by the United Nations bureaucracy. Remember the founding aims and objects. The founding aims and objects of the United Nations are being trampled on, being walked on, as countries like Ethiopia, regimes like Ethiopia, violate the founding aims and objectives of ending war and of upholding human rights. And there is a big read about investment, and the topic is cryptocurrency. Now, Donald Rumsfeld, who was a complete idiot, but was elevated to the level of being a deep philosopher, has eventually he's passed away. And here is a man writing about America, and the heading is My Travels with Donald Rumsfeld. He's Dimitri Sevastopoulou. Sevastopoulou appears to be a Greek name, but we shall check and update accordingly. Now, Dimitri Sevastopoulou writes in the first paragraph, one of my most incongruous memories of covering Donald Rumsfeld, who died this week at the age of 88, was watching the United States Defense Secretary receive a lesson in Irish revolutionary history at the Shannon Airport bar. Returning from a trip to China, we had stopped at Shannon to refuel, telling him that it was rude not to drink with an Irishman in his own country. I convinced Rumsfeld to join the reporters and aides for a drink. As Rumsfeld drank Irish coffee, the barman explained how one of the reporters had committed a sin by ordering a black and tan, the name given to a controversial British police unit during the Irish War of Independence, but a drink in the United States. It was a light-hearted moment for someone whose own gaffes frequently landed him in trouble. During his career, Rumsfeld served in myriad roles, including as a congressman, NATO ambassador, and White House chief of staff to Gerald Ford, who later made him defense secretary. When George W. Bush appointed him to the same role in 2000, Rumsfeld made history by having been both the youngest and the oldest Pentagon chief, and the only person to hold the role twice. Bush appointed Rumsfeld both because of his security credentials, but also because as chief executive of GD, Searle, a pharmaceutical company, he had earned plaudits for effectively restructuring a big organization, and Bush wanted someone to reform the Pentagon. But he was cast into a very different role after the 9/11 terror attacks, which led to the US invasion of Afghanistan and Iraq. So he goes into the last paragraph, but one. One of Rumsfeld's most vocal critics was Senator John McCain, who said he would go down in history as one of the worst secretaries of defense. He is often compared with Robert McNamara, the Vietnam War era defense secretary, who also entered the public pantheon of villainous defense officials. Yet, unlike McNamara, who later showed some remorse, Rumsfeld never showed regret for the Iraq War, which claimed the lives of almost 500,000 people and left the country in chaos from which it has yet to recover. Whether Rumsfeld ever expressed remorse in private will remain, in his own words, a known unknown. Now that is the stupidity. Stupidity of writing this piece and the stupidity of the man himself. Now, Sanjeev Gupta, who failed to appear before a parliamentary committee, is not kind of leaving business to others. He is very busy doing what he has been doing. Sanjeev Gupta is the one that has been involved with various allegations, multi-billion pound corruption, fronted, among others, by Green Seals, David Cameron. We shall come to that statement, because if there was morality and ethics in any way playing any part in British political kind of life and decisions, then Fleet Street would have focused entirely on the corruption of the Conservatives, corruption by the Conservatives, instead of running a campaign to sink a politically dead party, the Labour Party, as fronted by Keir Starmer. We shall, of course, come back to those topics in due course. This is a Weekend FT editorial. There are two editorials in today's Weekend FT. The first one is the housing challenge facing central banks. And as we have said, the Financial Times, we have called it, recalled it, or re-edited, or edited and renamed it as Financial Crimes. The truth will not be contained in this editorial that is alluringly referring to housing challenge. Now, it's a editorial that is peddling the cause of the central banks while talking about making renting rather than owning a more secure experience. But that's it. It's a token piece, typically doing a token job by the financial crimes. Now, this is £4. FT weekend is £4. It's equivalent to the combined cover price of all the tabloids in Fleet Street. Today, think about that. £4, and you can convert the currencies to take your sum in your local currency. And the financial FT weekend has got, of course, the cover headline is Northern Ireland, or the heading is Northern Ireland through youthful eyes. That's the youthful eyes. And the how to spend it. And it is absolutely contemptuous of the many and absolutely defiant two fingers to the millions in poverty. The millions cannot afford to spell these 3 words, 4 words. How to spend it. They simply cannot even pronounce these 4 words. And they got a plug for Francis Ford Coppola's granddaughter. How many in the many? How many among the many in this country who are in poverty and low income and are more in contact with denial and deprivation can put themselves in any comparable situation as the granddaughter of Francis Ford Coppola? And the stupid heading about the environment reads, heat waves raise doubts on whether humanity is ready for warmer planet. Built environment will need to adapt if temperatures seen in US and Canada become the new normal or become new normal. And it seems that the financial crimes, whoever edits it and makes the decisions, is written by people who are suffocated in their brains. They never tell it straight. Now here is an exception to that statement I've just made. They never tell it straight. This is a straight statement. How heat waves became climate change's silent killer. And it's byline to Frederick Otto, who is described as the Associate Director of the Environmental Change Institute at the University of Oxford. So the last paragraph is enough. This person, the writer, Frederick Otto, is saying in the last paragraph, will such numbers, referring to the previous contents of the piece, containing numbers and data, will such numbers help politicians and industry take the crucial step from declaring climate emergencies to actually acting to prevent them? So this person is, of course, someone who describes themselves as a scientist. So we scientists can now provide hard data that allows us to link extreme weather. I'll read that again. We scientists can now provide hard data that allows us to link extreme weather events directly to human-caused climate change. Of course, it's humans who cause the climate change. But facts alone will not lead to resilient societies if those in charge of them continue to shirk their responsibility. Now, that is the nearest to a straightforward statement found in the financial crimes. And they got a whole supplement about house and home, FT Weekend, which is absolutely totally misleading about housing and housing rights. Most people having to exist in homes without gardens and without access to gardens and parks don't have the luxury of listening to bird song. So here is the piece in the Financial Crime saying, nature therapy, and it's byline to somebody called Jonathan Gartrey. You may have to miss your favorite music festival, but you can still enjoy the concerts of thrushes and blackbirds. Deciphering what they are saying is another matter. And there is a piece, there is a statement highlighting animal behavior. Animal behaviorist Conrad Lawrence interpreted the contact calls of geese as simply, "Here am I, where are you?" And one part of this piece by Jonathan Gartrey, who is described as the head of Lex. We shall come to what Lex is. And we can now go to socially distanced concert halls and hear Vaughan Williams's idyllic "The Lark Ascending." This popular classical piece evokes dewy-eyed nostalgia for a vanished rural England. But unless we mend our destructive ways, only the human music will survive. The birds that inspired it will be gone. Yes, but this is, again, it's like somebody suffocating him. There has to be a description from A to Z of how to protect birdsong and birds and the rest of the environment. But it is not there. So what is suffocating the writers of the financial crimes? And the rest of the piece about, well, rest of the supplement, misleadingly called House and Home, is full of stuff like that. And they're talking in the main piece on the front page of that supplement. They're talking about the address 1 Hyde Park Place and billionaires. They're not talking about the many. So the entirety of the FT weekend, including the supplement, including the magazine, How to Spend It, and including the FT magazine, is about the few, the fewest of the few. And it is complete brazen, two fingers to the many in the population. Now, we have said about the Fleet Street, the rest of Fleet Street, that is the likes of the Beaverbrook corruption criminality called the Daily Express or Suppress, Sunday Express or Sunday Suppress, about the coverage or cover-ups about the pandemic and the virus. And we have said, and we continue to say, more than a year on from the start of the appearance of the virus in the UK, that the Fleet Street papers are again misleading people, creating a mirage, a fantasy, a flimsy, fabricated image of journalism, of reporting. of investigating pieces. But they're not. What they're doing by referring to the virus, the vaccine, the related other aspects, they're serving as colluders in the corrupt propaganda of brainwashing lies by the controllers of politics or political decision making. The many, as well as the overwhelming majority of the population, are being left uninformed about the various stages of the virus and the various findings and the various tests. They are not detailing those, they're not even mentioning those. And this piece about FT money has got pieces about this kind of supplement, FT money. Has got typically financial crime type of headlines that are alluring. They're almost telling the truth, but not quite. So, for example, here is a piece on page 4 of the FT Money, written by Claire Barrett, Serious Money. And the heading is, How much is bad maths costing Britain? And they've got her described as involved in the financial crimes, financial literacy and inclusion campaign. Well, the inclusion aspect of it suggests that they might be talking about rights of the many that are deprived of rights. But that may be an illusion. So if any of the persons among the many can actually spend the £4 in the shop to get hold of the financial crimes, most of that money would have been wasted because they won't have any recognition of the life experience in any of the pieces. Only illusions and mirage. And despite the limitations, she's talking about the fact that the bad maths is part of the experience children have in schools. Schools don't teach good maths, let's say. And that actually supports our general thesis that there is no education in this country. Because if there were education in this country, crooks, liars, cheats would not be occupying the main political positions in government in this country, positions in big business, positions in bank, like Andy Haldane, described as the chief economist at the Bank of England. Nobody ever heard of him until a few months ago, when he featured in absolutely untruthful peddling by Fleet Street. He said, Andy Haldane that is, according to the lying, ignorant, stupid Fleet Street papers that gave him the platforms, that the UK economy was on course to witness growth not seen for more than 70 years. Now, that was, let's say, 3 months ago when he hit the headlines. Now, the same Andy Holden is saying that there is a danger that there will be inflation. Too much inflation. Now, growth by definition is inflation. So what on earth is this Andy Holden saying? He must be one of those who suffers from and embodies, personifies, and is an embodiment of bad maths, as described by Claire Barrett in FT Money this FT weekend. So again we say, if the chief economist at the Bank of England cannot get his facts right, and is apparently not bothered about not getting his facts right, there cannot be an education, because he must have been denied an education. So if somebody appointed to the post of the chief economist at the Bank of England, which is very high level of appointment, where to find the evidence of those who were educated? Nowhere, because there is no education. That's the whole point. A society which has no education and yet is grabbing as a historic kind of reality other people's billions and trillions, such a society can and does feel no problem in having 20 million of its population in low income, poor housing, and suffering lack of access and denial of access to remedies through the legal system. This is the KhoodeelaarTV television channel, broadcasting on the internet only. And we are doing that. This is part A on Saturday. Saturday, the 3rd of July, 2021. What is this character described as the editor of the I newspaper, Oliver Duff? Historically, going by the evidence of his contributions in the I newspaper, we can confidently say that he is daft. So the name Oliver Duff is actually linked to the daft attitude, and that is what he must be doing today as well. Let's see whether we've got it consistently right as well. So this piece is a complacent piece, and although it talks about home, it doesn't refer to the homelessness and the lack of housing rights that millions endure. And this heading, Facebook used by crime gangs to promote people smuggling to the UK. This is not recognizing the reason for the desperation suffered by the victims of the people smuggling. And even before reading the actual contents of this piece, I can safely say that there is no mention in this piece that is overhyped by this editor as investigative piece by Cahal Milmo and Dean Carby. It doesn't refer to the UK's obligations, France's obligations, and obligations by other Western European countries, which are the destinations, apparently, of lucrative trafficking, people trafficking by crooks operating at the expense of the migrants. And there is no recognition in that piece of the UK's dishonesty, both paraded by Priti Patel, the Interior Minister, so-called, or the Home Secretary, as well as by Boris Johnson, as well as by the Fleet Street Daily Mail Group, The Sun, and so on. And it most certainly is not referring to the corruption of the local county councils on the coast. Kent County Council, Surrey County Council, these are the two nearest to London. And both are controlled by the Conservatives. And both have been in poisonous, racist, complicit collusion with Priti Patel and Boris Johnson's cabal in maintaining untruthful, hateful, and dangerously irresponsible propaganda through the media, Fleet Street, Daily Mail, the scum, the Express, the bribing Boris Johnson graph, and in disguised language and manner by the BBC, aggravated by the local papers in circulation or local media, in circulation, in existence in the coastal regions of Surrey and Kent. So we shall be going back to this story, and also we shall go deeper into discussing the Batley and Spen by-election and the implications. Now, the Times has got a piece here on the magazine, the Saturday magazine. Two women that it is describing the brains behind the Oxford vaccine. And these women are called super vaxxers, the scientists who saved Britain. That's what they're saying. To what extent that is true is, of course, not immediately obvious, but that's the boast they're making. And we shall be looking and they're being quoted as saying, well, they're quoting Catherine Green, 46, as saying, we decided if we are going to need it, we're going to need it fast. Let's prove we can do it and how fast we can do it. I have had people say to me they have had their vaccine and they're so grateful. And I don't think they expect it, but they get very emotional. That's Professor Sarah Gilbert, 59, on the left. So Catherine Green and Sarah Gilbert are the two women that are being featured in the Times magazine, which is boasting the Magazine of the Year title, dated the 3rd of July, 2021. We shall examine the evidence. Now let's see what the Times has. It should get the piece about Galloway by Oliver Cram that we have tweeted about overnight. And let's see what the printed papers carries, if it carries that piece. By Oliver Cram said about Galloway that Galloway was a loser. And that was a piece about Galloway's behavior in Battalion Spem. Now, Peter Brooks has got a cartoon which is playing on the name of the constituency. And I shall So where is the piece by Oliver Cram that says, loser George Galloway? This is not printed as a column. And the by-election result, as well as the run-up to the actual polling day events, They've got a 2-page spread about the result in Batley and Spen in West Yorkshire in England. And there is a very funny, well, ironic, funny, and completely telling heading. I shall come to that in a minute. And the photograph of Brenda, that is Queen Elizabeth II, with Angela Merkel, apparently doing her last visit to Britain as leader of Germany, has got a fitting kind of heading to the photograph. And the fitting heading is Merkel paves way for holidays in the European Union without quarantine. And there is an adjoining piece headlined, Rich care providers took furlough cash. Well, that is really not news, because that is what has been happening with Rishi Sunak, the finance minister, benefiting his fellow hedge funders and assorted similar looters of the UK financial resources. And there is a reluctant piece, belated piece about Raheem Sterling, who scored the first goal against Germany during the week. And it's a piece about him leaving the violent streets of Jamaica when he was aged 5. And there is the Times, in the 2-page spread, the main piece is about disloyal Angela Rayner should be sacked, Starmer is told. Now that is stupid. She has denied, or people close to her have denied, that she discussed challenging Starmer at all. We said that she shouldn't have denied. She could have said she has the right to discuss the future of the party. And so the line in the Times is that the Labour Party should be blamed. And what the piece by Nathan Paris is saying is that he's using the topicality of the Batley and Spen by-election to continue his theme that Boris Johnson should go. but he's doing it in a soft way. Remember, this is the we shall continue in the next part.